to myself, comma, it's a carpenter's job. And that was the first time I was like, that should be an M dash, not a comma. That doesn't make any sense as a comma. And then, like 2 pages later, there's bunches of commas that I marked in here where I was like, comma, why is this comma? It should be an M dash. She who would have stayed in the backlands of Alagoas in a cotton dress and without any typewriter, since she wrote so badly, comma, she had only had 3 years of school, which again seems like an M dash. Then there's parts where there's no commas at all, where it feels like there should be commas, and the punctuation's like really the most startling thing to see initially. So you did exactly what you stated with like
I kept it all. I mean, there's a couple of places where you just can't do it anymore for different reasons, but and I'm working with these translators on this other project, and it's hard. I mean, people want to do it. You want to sort of correct her. I'll give you actually an even weirder example. Okay. This is like pre-Google. I'll just tell you because there's so much of this stuff that if you start doing it, it's really hard to stop. She writes, there's a mention of Marilyn Monroe, and she spells it M-A-R-Y-L-I-N, which is just a mistake, I'm sure. I don't think she's making some deep artistic point here. So you could change it, saying, like now you would Google it, and you would think, oh, it's the other way around, and that would be it. But, you know, this is written in the 70s, and people didn't, you know, it's just a name. And the thing is, though, once you start changing any of that stuff, it's very easy to think, oh, well, just to make this a little clearer, I'll put this. But as soon as you start doing that, it's a slippery slope. And the punctuation is really, it's very strange. It's not right in Portuguese. The grammar is not right in Portuguese. And yet, like a lot of, well, you know, I mean, it's like she makes an allusion in this book to jazz. No, it's in Agua Viva, where she talks about jazz. It is like jazz, where everyone's kind of going off and this and that, and yet it sort of works. And you can't really say, if you were sitting down and you were going to say, okay, you're the trombone, you're the guitar, you're the whatever, and you couldn't really, you'd lose the magic of it. Because the magic is actually that weird rhythm that comes from really brilliant people at the top of their game, doing something completely innovative.
That's very true. So why don't you read a section of yours, then I'll read the smoothed out version.
Oh, okay. Well, this is just a silly example. It says, you know what else I learned? Do you have that paragraph?
I'll find it as you keep reading. Read like a page or two.
Well, I'll just read a couple of paragraphs. But it says, you know what else I learned? This is her talking to her evil boyfriend. They said you should be glad to be alive. So I am. I also heard a pretty song, comma. I even cried. A samba? I think so. And sung by a man named Caruso, who they said already died. His voice was so gentle, it even hurt to hear it. The song was called Una Furtiva Lacrima, L-A-C-R-I-M-A. I don't know why they didn't say lagrima, L-A-G-R-I-M-A. Okay, now, obviously, lacrima, Italian lagrima in Portuguese is the same word, it means tear. But then so then it says, Una Furtiva Lacrima had been the only really beautiful thing in her life, wiping away her own tears, so then you get the tear reference. She tried to sing what she heard. Now, in his thing, you can see what he does with this in terms of over-explanation.
Okay, so, do you know the best thing I've learned? They said on Radio Clock that we should be glad to be alive, and I am. I also heard some lovely music and I almost wept. Was it a samba? I believe it was. It was sung by a man called Crusoe, who they said died a long time ago. His voice was so gentle that it was almost painful to listen to. The music was called Una Furtiva Lacrima. I don't know why they couldn't say lagrima the way that it's said in Brazil. Una Furtiva
Wait, just want to pause there for a second. Like, the way it's said in Brazil, it's like, yeah, we realize this is a Brazilian book. Like, you wouldn't, when you put that kind of intervention in the dialogue, it suddenly makes her, and also that, like, I believe so. I mean, the guy was British, so it's not necessarily wrong, but it sounds really kind of prissy, you know. And this is a Brazilian girl with a third-grade education. They don't say "I believe so." You know, I mean, they just anyway.
Wait, the rest of it is not as.
Yeah.
Not.
No, but you know, I mean, there is a. But I'm just saying what I'm saying about condescension. Like, you know, you have to. You can't. We didn't put notes in this one. A couple of the other ones have notes because they're unfinished and they need a few notes at the end. But I don't believe in talking down to people that you're translating for or writing for. I think that, like, people can figure it out, and when you put all that junk in there, it just slows it down and it makes it sound strange in ways it doesn't sound strange in the original. and it takes away the strangenesses where it should sound strange.
Yeah, that's very true.
Maybe
I mean, that comes through very clearly in between these two, where he does over-explain a lot and try and like make sure you know what is being said, and it loses that kind of stark, strange beauty that comes through in your translation, where it is sort of jagged and is like a, I don't know,
it's supposed to be jagged, but also like one thing he does, just to think, I mean, it's a really problematic translation. There's all sorts of errors in it, but I mean, like he leaves out paragraphs and all this kind of thing. But one thing, there's a state in Brazil where her boyfriend is from called Paraíba, which is in the northeast, north of Recife, if you're familiar with that area. And Paraíba is a state, just like Missouri is a state, or California is a state. And maybe Brazilians haven't necessarily heard of, like, Vermont, whatever, just to give an example. But then you say the state of Vermont, and then you say Vermont. Figuring your reader's not a total moron, but every single time where she says Paraíba, he says the northeastern state of Paraíba. You know, it's like the picturesque New England state of Vermont. It's like 12 times. It's like, but, and that comes through in all these ways that are, you know, that's a sort of silly example. But when you do that on every single thing, you have to give your readers a little bit of credit.
Yeah. And that is, and one of the important things that we were talking about before this too, is that part of your project, which we can talk about in a second too, but just with this translation, is to actually really be introducing her to the American audience, because this is not her. Based on comparing these two, this is not at all the writer that people from Brazil know and love, and Luis. And sorry, Giovanni.
Giovanni, the late great. He, you know, he did do some good things, and he cared about her, and he spent years working on her. But you know, we were talking to some Latin American literature professors today at this conference, and one of the things that, you know, Latin American people who work with in this area have, okay, if everyone knows Spanish and Portuguese, then it's fine. You give the course and you let everybody read things in Spanish and Portuguese, but the fact is not everybody knows Spanish and Portuguese. And one of the great things, like what Chad does, is that, you know, you want it to be, it's not going to be 100% the same, obviously, in another language, but it'd be nice to be able to teach a class on Latin American literature, or on Brazilian literature, or just on her, and be able to actually get into the books without being distracted by all that stuff.
Right,
so, and having to be wary about, like, is this right? So this project, these 5 books are the beginning, and then we hope that we're going to buy them, everyone, because then we can finish the whole. We want to do the complete works. But, you know, it's an expensive.
So there's a segue into that too. What was it like working with Barbara Epler editing this book, and then how did you take over doing these 4 books, and why did you choose those 4 books? And do you want to give any?
Yeah, well, Barbara Epler is like my favorite person in the whole world. I don't know if you guys
She's been on here for the Reading World Conversations.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. She is. Did anyone meet her or see her? Barbara Epler is a hero of our time. She is the editor-in-chief of New Direction. And New Direction.
Publisher. She got promoted.
Oh, I said editor-in-chief and publisher.
And
maybe. Anyway, she has a corner office now. She's very important. She's extremely great. She's very warm. Yes. Everybody loves Barbara. And
you cannot.
And she writes the most tactful emails. She's incredible. You know, because I'll be up at 3 in the morning. I'll be like, "Could you please go ahead?" And you know, and she'll be like, "Hello, everybody." You know, and like, and she's telling people.
That's a pretty good imitation of her voice in some ways.
Yeah, no, she's really warm. She's really nice, and she can write these really aggressive emails, but put them in a way that people will just be honored and flattered to be sending their stuff in on time. Yeah. Whereas I'm like, damn it, send it to me. And so how did we choose these 4 books? So this one was coming out, and this was a personal mission of mine. And one of the things about The Hour of the Star and about her, when I was working on this book, I would say Clarice Lispector is the greatest writer of the 20th century. Please don't read her work. Because I would say this, and then if they read this stuff, they would
To English people.
To English-speaking people.
Yeah.
Brazilians need no explanation. And actually, Latin Americans in general, because she's very well translated in Spanish. Portuguese to Spanish is a lot easier than Portuguese to English. And with her son, Paulo, who is a friend of mine, we thought we want to bring all the books to one publisher. Because there were some in Minnesota, there were some in Texas, there were some in New Directions, there were some that were only available in the UK, there were some that were totally non-available anywhere, out of print. So The Passion According to G.H., which a lot of people think is her greatest novel, and Agua Viva which is a very fantastic, even shorter than this book from 1973. We're going out of contract at Minnesota, so we had those two that we could take over contractually with New Directions, and then A Breath of Life, which is her posthumous work, which I showed fragments of it, is written on scraps of paper. It's insane.
This is a fascinating story. You should digress and explain like how
it was done.
At some point, yeah.
Well, she was dying, and she was writing this book as she was dying, and she had this secretary. In 1966, when she was 46 years old, this beautiful woman, troubled, as you will tell. I mean, she took massive amounts of sleeping pills. She couldn't sleep, and she smoked, and that combination led to a fire, and she almost died. And from one day to the next, I mean, she almost had her hand amputated. It's really a horrible, horrible story. I mean, she did months of plastic surgery and you know, to pick herself up. And at age 46, the height of her career, suddenly she becomes an old woman. Fragile, she can't walk well, she can't sleep well, she's sick. And she dies at age 56, 10 years later, but she never really recovers from this thing. And so this woman, Olga, comes in to help her. And Olga was a former nun who was a miracle of patience, because Clarice was not the world's easiest person, according to everyone. She was childlike, people said. She needed someone to take care of her. And so Olga came in, and Olga was a good editor. And Clarice would write stuff all over, you know, on her packs of cigarettes, and on checks, and on grocery lists. She would do stuff. And Olga would put it in envelopes, and she would arrange it, and she would keep it, and she would help her edit these things into books. And that's what Agua Viva was. That's what A Breath of Life was. That's what all her late and her magnificent, beautiful last books on. And so I was showing earlier today what this actually looks like. These things are preserved in an institute in Rio, and it's just scraps of paper. And a lot of these books wouldn't have ever been born without Olga's incredible patience.
And the fourth book is Near
the Wild Heart.
Yeah. I always screw that up.
Which is Clarice's first novel that she writes when she's 23, totally unknown. And that was her debut. It's a hard life to write about in a lot of ways. The best part of